All right. Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Always exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And today we're going to be tackling something that's, well, let's be honest, it's pretty universal.
Yeah.
Marriage and kids. We're going to be looking at a podcast episode we found all about navigating that whole world,
Right.
trying to keep your relationship strong while also, raising little humans.
That's complicated.
Well, that's why we're diving in, right? To see if this podcast episode has any wisdom to share. Okay, let's get into it.
All right, I'm ready.
So, right off the bat, this podcast, they emphasized communication, which on the surface sounds pretty basic, right?
Like, duh, of course you need to talk to each other.
Exactly. They actually more than that.
Yeah, they got into like the nitty gritty.
Like how to actually do it.
Yeah, how to do it effectively.
So they highlighted this idea of like active listening.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like when you actually paraphrase what your partner is saying.
Back to them.
Yeah.
So you're both like,
You're really understanding like the feelings behind the words.
totally. So instead of just being like, uh-huh, yeah, okay, you actually like,
Right. It's not just about hearing, but like truly understanding like what's going on for them emotionally.
yeah. And they even gave an example. Like, let's say you're trying to plan for the holidays.
Ooh, stressful.
Right. And maybe your partner is feeling super overwhelmed. Instead of just being like, well, we got to do it,
Yeah, suck it up.
you could say, hey, it seems like you're really feeling stressed about the holidays. Like acknowledging their feeling.
Oh, right.
And then, is that right? Like just that little check-in?
I love that because it makes your partner feel like actually heard and seen.
Yes, exactly. And it can prevent so many misunderstandings.
Oh, absolutely.
Because sometimes you think you're on the same page, but you're actually miles apart.
Right. Totally different planets.
And this whole communication thing,
Yeah.
it ties right into what the podcast said about trust.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Like you can't have a solid relationship without that foundation of trust.
Because if you don't feel safe to like open up and be honest,
Vulnerable. Yeah.
then how can you really build something that lasts?
Yeah. And, they talked about respect too, like respecting each other's opinions even when you totally disagree.
Oh, it's a tough one.
Oh, it's huge though, like valuing each other's input, even on like the small stuff,
Yeah, even if it's like where to go for dinner.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
And it's funny because thinking about it now, like trust, respect, communication, they're all so connected.
Oh, totally. They build on each other.
Yeah, like respect can actually fuel trust. And when you have trust, you can communicate more openly and honestly.
Exactly. And when all those things are strong, you're ready to tackle anything,
Bring on the challenges.
including the biggest one of all,
Oh boy, here we go.
parenthood.
Parenthood.
I mean, talk about a game changer.
It's a whole new ball game.
Is it going from a duet to a whole orchestra overnight?
Oh, that's a good one.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like suddenly there were so many more players, so many more needs.
Yeah. And so much less sleep.
Oh my goodness. Don't even get me started on the sleep deprivation.
So how do you even maintain your relationship with all of that going on?
Right. Because it's so easy to just get swept up in the day-to-day of taking care of the kids that you forget about, nurturing your own connection as a couple.
You just get lost in diapers and dishes.
Exactly. You're just surviving. You're not thriving.
You need to find that balance though, right?
Well, that's what this podcast was all about. They actually had this great suggestion. They call them micro dates.
Micro dates, I like that.
Yeah. So it's not like you have to have these elaborate date nights all the time.
Right.
But just finding little pockets of time.
Like even 15 minutes while the baby's napping.
Yeah. Put the phones down, connect with each other.
Just reconnect.
It doesn't have to be fancy. It could be as simple as like having a cup of coffee together or,
Just chatting.
yeah, just chatting, catching up.
And you know what I really appreciated about this podcast is that they emphasized how important that couple connection is for the kids too.
Oh, totally. It's like that whole put your own oxygen mask on first thing.
Exactly.
Because if you're not taking care of yourself and your relationship, you can't be the best parent you can be.
Right, you're running on empty.
Exactly.
And the kids pick up on that too. They see that mom and dad are happy and connected.
And it creates this sense of security and stability.
Yeah, it models a healthy relationship for them.
Okay, so we've talked about communication, trust, respect, the importance of maintaining that couple connection, even after kids come along. But we got to talk about one of the biggest challenges facing parents today.
Ooh, which one?
Screen time.
Yes, the elephant in the room.
I mean, it's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Phones, tablets, TVs, it's constantly vying for our attention.
Yeah, and our kids' attention.
Exactly. And this podcast, they really got into the weeds on this. They talked about the developmental impact of too much screen time on young children.
Yeah, like how can affect their language skills.
And their attention spans.
Your social skills.
And then there's the whole social media pressure cooker.
Oh, don't even get me started. Like those perfect Instagram feeds.
Ugh, yes. The Pinterest-worthy birthday parties, the spotless homes.
It's like everyone else has it all figured out except for you.
Right. And it makes you question your own parenting choices.
Like, am I doing this all wrong?
Exactly. But you know what? This podcast, it reminded me that every family is different.
That's a good point to remember.
There is no one-size-fits-all approach to parenting.
So true.
What works for one family might be a total disaster for another.
And we shouldn't be afraid to experiment and figure out what works for us.
Absolutely. And that brings up a really interesting question that the podcast raised. Like, what does success in parenting even mean?
That is a good question.
Is it about meeting all these external expectations?
Or is it about creating a happy and healthy environment for your own family?
Exactly. It's about defining your own values and priorities as a family.
But that's going to look different for everybody.
Totally. The podcast guests actually had some different opinions on this, but they all agreed that it's so important to keep those lines of communication open with your kids.
Yeah, talk to them, listen to them.
And involve them in decision-making as they get older.
Give them a voice.
Yes. And amidst all the chaos and the challenges, we can't forget to have fun.
Right.
Enjoy those little moments with our kids.
Yeah, the spontaneous dance parties in the kitchen.
The bedtime stories.
The silly jokes.
Those are the things that we'll remember.
That make it all worthwhile.
So if we had to sum it all up, I think what we've learned from this deep dive is that building a strong foundation for marriage and parenthood, it really comes down to those core values we talked about at the beginning.
Communication, trust, and respect.
Exactly. And then when parenthood comes along, it's like you add a whole new layer of complexity.
Right. You have to find a new balance.
But it's so important to prioritize that couple connection.
Not just for yourselves, but for your kids, too.
And remember, it's okay to ask for help.
Don't be afraid to lean on each other, on your support system.
Parenting is definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
A marathon with lots of obstacles and detours.
But it's also an incredible journey.
Filled with so much love and laughter.
And before we wrap up, I have one final thought for you all to chew on.
All right, hit me.
So the podcast talked about involving kids in decision-making. I'm curious, what are some ways you can do that in an age-appropriate way?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right? Like, how can you give them a voice without overwhelming them?
And how might that actually change your family dynamic?
Definitely something to think about. And remember, every family's journey is unique.
Absolutely.
Keep exploring what works best for yours, and don't be afraid to reach out for support along the way.
You got this.
We're all in this together.
Cheers to that.
Cheers. All right, until next time.
See you later, Celeb.